Hey, friend. Welcome back to the Anchored with Purpose podcast. Today in the studio, we have my friend, Kristin DeVan. Now, Kristin is a mom of four. She has been in ministry for over 20 years, and she has a deep passion and commitment for her faith. I can't wait for you to learn some of her simple tips for having a great family faith life and how she pours into others and pours into herself as well. Let's dive in. Well, hey, Kristin, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
I am excited that we're finally doing this. We've been talking about doing this for a long time. I think since I interviewed you for the Rebuilt podcast months ago before our conference that was back at the beginning of summer.
Wow. It feels like it was not that long ago, but I guess it was now that I think about it. But yes, from the moment that we connected digitally, we thought, I feel like we need to have more conversations. So we're finally doing it.
Definitely. And it was one of those things like when we were talking, we were loving our conversation. We finally met in person. We were like, did we just become best friends? Like, I just love when it's that kind of a connection.
Absolutely. I think that it's one of those things where it's kind of like when you're doing like blind dating or not blind dating, sorry, like first date.
Yeah.
And then you think about it and you're like, are they feeling what I'm feeling? Like, I don't know. Do I say it? Do I not? And then I think one of us said something and we're like, okay, great. Yeah, we're both feeling this. Great.
Same page. And we're like the same size, which like that doesn't happen. Like not many, everybody else is taller than me, but it's like fun. We're the fun size together.
We're fun sized in all the ways.
I love it. Well, Kristin, can you just kick us off by sharing a little bit about yourself, your background, your journey through faith as a teacher, a mom of four, and kind of how your faith has shaped your whole life?
Yes, that is a lot of stuff to answer, but yes. So I grew up loving church. I started serving in church. I was attending my whole life. I remember being a little kid and bringing bookmarks to like stick in the hymnals to, bookmark the songs in advance and all these kinds of things. So I always had an interest in church and loved going. And when I was 8, I had a ministry opportunity where Nativity had said, hey, we're going to get kids involved in reading and lecturing at Mass. And so, if you want to volunteer for that. And I had done, theater as a child and was doing theater then. And so I signed up immediately for that. And I practiced that one reading for my first Mass that I was doing so long. I remember it very clearly. And I remember the first time I did it and I was 8 years old and they paired you with an adult lector. So, that to make sure that if it was terrible, there was someone there to bail you out. And I just loved it. Like I fell in love with it. I remember distinctly when it happened. And that to me was the beginning of what serving in church looked like and what it could look like when you have gifts God has given you and a passion for something and an opportunity to build God's kingdom. And so when it all comes together, it just like explodes in this beautiful collision. And so that to me is a very definitive moment of my faith that I talk about because it became less about the consumer mentality that Rebuilt talks about a lot and more about just the contributor and what can I bring to the table and how can I build God's kingdom. So I don't know if I was putting all that together at 8 years old, but I remember that it was something special to me. So since then, I have always been involved in church. And I really do believe that my relationship with Jesus started when I was 8. I feel like that was a very significant time for me where I started to realize that there was a reason why I felt safe and happy and joyful to go to church. And there was a reason why I felt great there and I felt accepted and loved and cared about. And that's what church community is supposed to be. But I don't know if everybody gets the opportunity to experience that, particularly at that age. So I grew up at Nativity, just serving whenever I could, being super involved there, worked there in the summers during high school. And it was a huge part of my faith. It was a huge part of knowing Jesus and the role that he wanted to play in my life, how he directed my path. So that was very important to me. And I had a passion for theater and thought I always wanted to go into theater, but then decided that maybe that wasn't for me because there's just a lot of gray area morally for me that I was struggling with in terms of that world. It's so beautiful and I love it and I have such a respect for it, but I didn't know if it was for me anymore, which was very stressful for me. And so I often tell the story about how I was in high school and I started to kind of panic because in my theater, I went to an arts high school and we had to read plays and do all these things. And I started to get in a little bit of trouble because I didn't want to curse when reading plays. And it just became a very like high school moral issue for me. I look back on it now and I'm like, I think you could have like calmed down a little bit. That's what I would have told my high school self, but I was very stressed about it in high school. And I don't know, I just had this moment of like, what do I do? If I don't do this, what do I do? Because I saw so much of my identity in, being an actress, being in theater, things like that. And I remember writing everything I loved, everything from making cards for people to cheering people up, to having tea with people, to theater, to public speaking, to all the things, and kind of writing it all down. And I remember like praying over it and just saying like, Jesus, I offer this to you. I don't know what this means. But this is what I love. This is what I'm good at. And I really believe after that, Jesus was very clear and was leading me to consider doing youth ministry as a job. And that had never occurred to me. And I remember thinking like, yeah, why wouldn't I do that? That's what I love. Like, I love going, I love being at church. Why wouldn't I do that? And so it really changed the trajectory of what I wanted to study, what I wanted to do, how I wanted to spend my time. And so then I started looking at theology programs and studied theology at Mount St. Mary's University in Emmitsburg, Maryland, and really loved that. That's where my faith grew a lot, particularly because it was separate from Nativity, my home church. So sometimes when I think you're at your home church, your whole experience of faith, even though I had gone to other retreats and things, was very embedded in that church. And for me to experience a different type of mass, a different type of ministry was hard at first because I missed what I knew. But ultimately, it was so good for me because I gained such an appreciation for the person of Jesus outside of my comfort zone and what mass looked like when there was not good music and when there was not awesome things, that the presence of Jesus was still there. So that really grew my faith a lot. And then I came back afterwards, after graduating, and worked at Nativity full-time, which is what I had always wanted to do. And I did a lot of different jobs, but ultimately was struggling because I knew I loved teenagers and I knew I wanted to work with teenagers all the time, and particularly teen girls. And I'd known that, I think, even when I was a teen girl, that is what that's what I love. That's the audience I love the most. So I had tried all kinds of different jobs at Nativity and like loved so much of the opportunity I had and, really valued being there. But ultimately there was not an opportunity at the time to work with youth full time. I served in student ministry there, but not work with them. And then it just kind of like all came together in, God's perfect plan where I, was friends with my husband. I met him at church, which was also just, divine providence and just something that really answered the desire of my heart in that way. And I trying different jobs. I was in communications at the time. And, Father Michael White was like, you know what, you gotta go where God's calling you. We still want you here on the weekends. I was reading every mass. And so I think that was a big part of what I was doing there. And he just gave me the space to be able to explore. And I applied for 2 different high schools in the area, private girls Catholic high schools, and chose the one I had wanted, and I've been there for this is my 11th year, which is pretty awesome.
Wow.
And so I get to serve as campus minister for all girls school. And it was the same year I started here as when I got married. So it was like boom, 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 life changed. And then, now I have 4 kids and I'm still here and I love being here. And I have really found, such a beautiful balance of investing in teenagers and what that looks like, and also being able to invest in my family and to, balance that the best I can.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Your story is just incredible. And I feel like we could go on so much just about that background. For those who aren't familiar with Nativity and Rebuild, can you just give like a quick 30-second synopsis of kind of like what the story is there? Because you were there on the ground floor through a lot of the changes.
Absolutely. So I was in middle school at the time, and that was a time when the church was really changing. People were leaving. It was kind of, I don't want to say it was dying, but it definitely didn't have the life and energy that it needed to. Father Michael White, the pastor, and his associate Tom were just trying to, actually he was youth minister at the time, were, just trying to figure it out as to how to breathe life into it, and ultimately just relied on teenagers at the very beginning. We had a 5:30 youth mass, and they just started trying different things. We were like guinea pigs and would try anything, do anything. And slowly but surely that mass gained such incredible popularity to where it was like 1,000 people in a 500-person sanctuary, and people waiting and being backed in rows. And they thought, there is something to this. And from then on, it just became this huge movement of being one church, one message, and really like leading the church together as one community. And also, having the value of excellence, being excellent in all the ways, I think was a real game-changing thing for Nativity. And so it's just been a very vibrant, engaging, relevant church, particularly for people who maybe have stepped away from the Catholic Church or grew up Catholic and haven't been back in a while. And it really does welcome people of different faith traditions as well. And it's just a great place for a whole family to grow together. No matter what demographic you are, it's really accessible for everyone, and it allows you to go deeper if you want, but also stretches out to bringing you back if you haven't been to church in a while.
That's so good. Kristin, I know we could talk about that forever, but we've got a separate podcast for all of the rebuilt stuff. But I'm so glad you brought up bringing your whole family to Mass, no matter what. So you're a mom of 4. Life is full. It is busy. They're in school, you're teaching, they've got activities, you're still involved. How do you intentionally keep faith the center of your lives as a family and the center of your home?
That is something that I can honestly say we are still figuring out. My kids are little, and so sometimes it's easy to have the high school expectations or the high school brain that I have with my students here at home. But I think basics is really important for kids. I think that just having simple concepts in terms of whether it just be simple things that you implement throughout your family life. I think liturgical seasons are a huge part of that. I think they really help us because kids also live their life in seasons where it's like, your birthday finishes and the day after their birthday, they're like, it's almost my birthday. We're like, birthday just happened. So it's like, they're always looking for the next thing. So being able to talk about things like Advent and Lent and things like that is really helpful in helping them to understand the flow of it. And I actually have a really good book that's talking about like living liturgically and how you can implement that for kids. So I've been looking through that to try and see that. But, also I think that they they see the parents' example. So I think that, even just going to church, committing to going to church as a family, that is a very challenging thing to do. But that is something that my husband and I really said, this is what we're doing. It's not negotiable. Obviously, sickness happens. That's kind of the only reason why we don't go. So we really, and I understand that they're young and we're going to have to make more difficult choices as they get older, because then there are conflicts. But I think really cementing that, like, no, this is what we do. And for us, we do it Sunday morning, and we are putting that as a huge value as our family, that this is what we do. We go to church together. So I think the example of that is really important. Also, they see that my husband and I serve in ministry. My husband's on the Mission Financial Council. We served in engaged couples ministry together, and I'm a small group leader. So I think, when I have my small group, they see that and they know that. They know that it's happening. And so I think that maybe that doesn't really mean that much now, but I think as they get older, they'll say, my parents were really busy and carved out time for these things because they're important to them, and also just relying, I want to rely on Jesus as much as I can. And I want them to know that that's what I'm doing, that I am a work in progress, just like them. I never want them to see me as someone who is perfect or complete or finished. So I try to remind them that, I am trying to work on things to better myself and become a better version of myself, a more holy version, just like I'm encouraging them to. So I think, a lot of like repair work with kids and like asking for forgiveness and saying, like, hey, I'm a work in progress. I'm sorry I got frustrated when you spilled your cereal on the floor this morning. But just offering that, just humbling yourself and being vulnerable before your kids is demonstrating to them, like, that's what the Christian life is saying, I messed up. Will you forgive me? Let me try again. And so, teaching them what grace means too, so I think those are just some simple things just by living that you're able to direct them to a God who's bigger than them, who cares about them and who loves them.
I love that. Just by modeling that life for them, they're going to pick up on it. That's how kids pick up on everything else, right? Whatever is modeled in front of them, that's how they pick it up. It makes so much sense. So now, aside from getting them to Mass every week, which, by the way, I just want everyone who's listening to know Kristin takes 4 kids every week. So for those of us who, gosh, when my kids were your kids' ages, it was hard to get them there. And I have half the number of kids you have. So that's incredible. That is a huge feat that you're getting 4 there. But
I have a good partner, so we have a good team effort.
That's incredible. And it helps that Nativity has incredible programs for the kids too, which I think that's huge. But what are some of the other practical traditions and prayers that your family has that are helping you live that faith life together? there?
I think simple things like praying before we eat, and trying to teach them the balance of that. We've been trying to, I think a lot of it is adapting as they get older, right? So much of
Yeah.
parenthood is you think you have it figured out and then it changes and you're like, okay, I thought I had it figured out, but I don't. So I think, as my oldest is 7, so I think we're at an age where we can really start to implement some things like what that looks like. And so I have a lot of ideas that, I can't say we've fleshed them all out, but um, I think my daughter's at an age where she can start to understand what it looks like to pray for someone else and
Mhm.
to really be thinking of others in a way that, how can I be a part of whatever it is they're going through or sharing in their joyful moments or things, and that praying for them really is something significant, something that matters. And so we're trying to do, whether it be at bedtime, doing intentions and asking, who she wants to pray for, things like that. I think music is a huge part of it, that I really connect to God through music, and my husband and I both love worship music. So I think anytime we can connect them with, fun music that really teaches them about scripture, because it's literally the lyrics of the song. It
Right.
was only after I started getting into Christian music in high school where I was like, oh, so I'm like memorizing scripture while I'm listening to this. This is like a 2-for-1 deal. So I think that that's hugely impactful for kids too, is, it's great to have kids singing fun songs that they heard. And of course, I love Disney songs and, anything like that. But to hear them, sing like Forrest Frank songs or, something
Well,
really.
I was literally just thinking of Forrest Frank,
Yep. We listen to a lot of Forrest Frank in our house.
it's so fun.
It's so fun, and it's really teaching them great things, and, it's
Yeah.
really, and I'll remind them of that, but just to be able to have them, singing, we're listening to Lemonade now, just like life gave me lemons and Jesus making lemonade. Like that's a
Yes.
great concept. It's really fun, but it's also really like deep if you think about it.
Yes.
And so that can be really helpful too. And I'm finding good resources too. We've got some really cool books, particularly for my older one, but even for my younger ones, where it's teaching them about like saints. We've got a really good, like, I think it's called Princesses of Heaven. And it's like, it's a book for young, for young kids that talks about the saints as, these like princesses. And of course, my daughter's all over that.
Right.
So it's a great way to make it accessible to them, but also to be like, wow, this is like a real person who did these real things. And so I think it's a mix of like resources and prayer and things like that.
That's so good. I need to look into the Saints and Princesses book for I've got 2 little nieces that I think would love that.
It's
That's
real fun.
yeah, but I mean, just this it's the simple things like you were just talking about, and I really love what you said about music because not only is it helping them memorize scripture, but it's fun and it's teaching those great life lessons, and it's so easy. Like it's so easy. It's literally putting it out of the car
Mm-hmm.
or having, we've got the Google Home in the kitchen, and that's like where the music comes from in the house usually, and it's just such a simple way for the kids to get to hear those positive messages.
Absolutely.
So, Kristen, we know that family life often brings challenges right alongside with the joys. Can you share a time when faith carried you and your family through a difficult season?
Every single day. No, just kidding. There's good days, but you have those like little moments of just, it's a lot. It's a lot of chaos in my house. And so my short answer is every single day. I feel like there are many times when I just find myself trying to take a breath and I'll be like, okay, like come Lord Jesus, just because I run out of patience or energy or something like that. So I would say every day, but on a deeper note, I think when we were starting a family, obviously that's a very exciting time, but I don't quite think, and maybe this is not something that should be, but I think we really felt unprepared for the journey that is. And I think it's always a journey. I think it's a journey if you get pregnant right away and, have your kids right away. I think it's a journey if you have trouble getting pregnant, and that becomes its own journey. When we were pregnant with our first child, we ended up miscarrying twice
Oh my God.
beforehand. And I think that, I had knew that existed. And I don't know if it would have been better had I known it was more prominent than it was, because you don't want to live in fear and you don't want to
Right.
approach, becoming a parent with fear. But I think that was very shocking to us, as we went to the first appointment and it wasn't even a thought. Like we were just
Mhm.
so excited and so, joyful and exciting that when it happened, we were like, I'm sorry, what? You
Yeah.
don't even like consider that. And so, I remembered, feeling very sad and feeling very disappointed, but also in the midst of that, I remember I didn't feel worried and I didn't feel stressed. I just felt sad, which is obviously all those feelings are valid. And I just remember, telling my husband and friends and things being like, I know we're going to be parents. Like I know that is the outcome. I'm very confident and I'm not worried and I'm not upset that maybe we won't be able to be parents. And so I think, and I know that was just the voice of faith, in my heart saying, I know that God has called us to be parents. And I know that is our story because I feel like he had confirmed that for us. And so I didn't know what that would look like, but I knew that would be the story. So for me, I feel like that was just a very calming, confident presence in the midst of something that was just very sad. And I think then when we miscarried again, it was the same sort of thing. I remember being like, okay, like, I'm not really sure. It's hard to find the reasoning. It's hard to find the why. I know that there's purpose in this too. Like, I don't know, what necessarily it is. And sometimes it's just to walk with other people through that. I don't think God causes those things to happen, of course, but I always know that he uses them. And I always know that he brings beauty out of ashes. That's just like what he does. And so that was just another experience where, it was just adding to the journey of that for us. But then we didn't feel paralyzed by fear. And I'm really grateful for that because it's very easy and very understandable to feel just paralyzed by fear in those sort of situations. But I think my husband and I both were like, we know we're going to be parents. Like we know that that's what God's called us to be. And so nothing is going to get in the way of that. It's just becoming a rockier, more tumultuous journey to get there than we thought. And so I really am grateful for that because it's in moments like that where my heart honestly breaks for people I know and people I don't know who maybe have not met Jesus, don't have a relationship with Jesus, because I just think like, I don't know how you all are getting through this because for me, that was such a huge part of being able to move forward and say, okay, this is sad and we are going to experience the grief and sadness of this, but also we are going to keep our eyes locked on, the one who made us and knows us and loves us. And with that strength, we are going to move forward and we're going to move forward into, whatever he calls us to do and be. And we knew that was parents. And so, when we were pregnant with our oldest daughter, Essie, I think it was the same sort of thing where we were feeling nervous, but I just remember being like, look, like God is in control, we can trust him, we can rely on him, and, he will carry us through. So I think that's the first one that really stands out to me as being a significant moment of faith.
And you talk about bringing that beauty from ashes, and now you've got 4 beautiful little ones at home.
And now our story just became brighter and more beautiful, and definitely just such a hard season that has born such beauty, like you said.
Yeah. How do you balance all of this? Like, how you've got so many vocations here, right? Wife, mom, teacher, disciple, servant leader, right? How are you balancing all of this without losing yourself in the busyness?
Very carefully. Very
Tell us your
carefully.
secret, Kristin. Everybody wants to know.
I wish I had one. I think everyone is doing the best that they can. I think my husband and I are really trying to figure out what it looks like to balance well. And there are definitely ways I think we're doing it well. And I think there are ways we could be doing it better. And so it's definitely a living and learning sort of situation. But I think it's important to make sure that you are being filled and that you're pouring out, right? Like, I think you just need both. So like, it's just the empty cup idea that like, you need to be filling your cup with whatever that looks like. And then you need to but like, I think a lot of people, parenthood like takes a lot out of you. And so it's good. It's a good kind of taking it out of you where you're pouring into your children. And that's very real and valid. But also I would say that I think that you need to be filling yourself up. So whatever that looks like, so my husband and I try and prioritize like time together and, exercise. And we both like to read and have that quiet time reading and things like that. I like to see friends, which doesn't happen too often, but when we can. But also I think, so that like is some of the stuff that fills us. But then I also think that you need to be pouring out to something outside your family. So, for us, like ministry is like that. Our friends are like that, where, we are investing in other people in addition to our kids. Because it's also just helping, I think, it's very easy to have your whole world be revolved around your kids. But we also feel like that's not exactly like healthy, or that's not exactly the way we want to be. Like, we don't want to have a household that is 100% revolved around our kids. We love our kids. We would do anything for them. But at the same time, we never want them to feel like they're the center of the universe, because
Right.
they're not.
Right. They're
They're
not.
not, and they shouldn't be. And so, they're a part of our household. They're a part of our family team. And they're a valuable member of that. But, our world does not revolve around them, and nor should their world revolve around us. And so
Right.
I think that that's how you maintain a household where you're trying to look outward, and we're trying to teach the kids, like, how are we looking out towards other people and seeing how we can love others better and more, and what it looks like to be a friend for my kids, and things like that. And so I think that helps with the balance, but also recognizing that you're going to drop a lot of balls.
Right.
And so I think I heard one analogy where it's like, you are always juggling balls and you're always going to drop some. Just make sure they're the plastic ones, like, not the
Yes.
glass ones. Like, I heard that somewhere, and I was like, that's wise, because for example, I'm a terrible calendar. I fully own that. For whatever reason, we have a calendar. I put things on the calendar, but I make more calendar mistakes than, many people combined. And I'm like, you know what? It always works itself out. It's
Yeah.
never like, life or death. It's, something where I have to pivot or do something or change something, or birthday party mix up, something like that. So I just own it that I'm not good at that. I'm trying to be better, but I somehow make a lot of calendar mistakes. My husband is very good at that. So when possible, he kind of takes the lead on those sorts of things, because it's just not my strength. But there are a lot of things, meal planning is my strength. And so, that's where I come in, and I'm like, I always have a meal planned.
That's amazing.
I think partnership is a huge part of being balanced too.
Definitely. One of the things you mentioned earlier is that you lead a small group. And I'd love to know, you're also talking about, making sure that you're being poured into. Talk to me about the role that being in a small group plays in that.
I love my small group so much. I have led many small groups over the past 20 years, and some of them have been women's groups, some of them have been mixed groups. My husband and I were in a couples group before we had kids. So I always have seen the value in small group, and there's definitely been stronger ones and not as strong ones. And what I mean by that is being able to go deeper, right?
Yeah.
Because I have always had a hunger for a small group that is not going to stay surface level, but is rather going to, like, get deeper and get authentic and real and share and be vulnerable. That is the kind of small group I want to invest in. So I really wanted to be in one in this season of motherhood, but to be honest, the timing just doesn't work. It just, even, I have friends who are in small groups and they wake up at like 5 and meet at 6 and things. And, like, I would love to do that in theory, but my kids are up then. So, like, that wouldn't even be
Yeah.
helpful or work. And so, finding the window of time to do that was always very tricky. So I think they did a launch a couple years ago, and it was one of the Lent ones where, Nativity said, hey, join a small group for 6 weeks in Lent, and so then I thought, well, I can do 6 weeks. And then if it really doesn't work, I'm not, committed past that. And I do love leading a group. And so I decided to launch a virtual, like, after bedtime moms of little kid group,
Oh, I love that idea.
because I think virtual was the only thing I could do at the time. And I was like, I don't love virtual because I love being with
Yep.
people fuels me so much, but it just wasn't in the cards. And so I said, I don't know how this is going to go. Like, I taught virtual Zoom classes during COVID. It was really miserable. I can't really see this going well, but I'll just try it. And it was completely the opposite, to be honest. Like, I loved it and I mean, then I was quickly reminded that there are differences from adult women to high school teenagers on Zoom when they're on a full day of Zoom school,
Right.
that they do want to talk, and it won't cut each other off, and they will look at you and turn their camera on and all those things. So I very quickly realized that it actually was much more conversational, and I felt like I was hanging out with them as opposed to being behind a screen. And I love the women that joined. I got to meet so many new people that I didn't know, and I were very different but similar too. One friend who's in the small group was out of state, but she watched Nativity every week online. So it was a great way for her to be plugged in. But I really, really enjoyed their perspective. And like I said, it's one of the first small groups I've been in, or the first in a long time. It goes deep. and, and where everyone, like, people are willing to share and offer thoughts and feedback and things. And so I really appreciate that. So I've stayed with it. And we kind of, right now we do every other week just because we found that is more doable for us. But I really do. I really love it. And I mean, even it's the kind of thing where you're like, oh, I have small group tonight. And you're like, okay, you join. And then you're like, oh no, wait, I love this. This is great. Right. Like it can be like anything else sometimes where you're thinking like, oh, it's something on my calendar I have to do. But then once you're in it, you're like, oh, no, wait, this is good for me. This is good for my soul. It's good to, talk about faith related things with other people who are like-minded in that way. And, I have lots of coworkers. I have lots of people I can talk to, but having a group that you can openly talk about your faith like that is super, super valuable, especially if they're all moms.
Oh my gosh, for sure. And it's definitely a great way to fill your cup. I mean, I'm like you. If there's anything on my calendar as we're nearing bedtime, I'm like, I don't wanna. I would rather just be in my pajamas and go to bed. But there is something just so special about that connection. And especially, I'm with you. I love the women's small groups. Like, I just love connecting with other women, getting to talk to them, like growing in our faith together. I mean, that amazing, beautiful things come out of small groups. And it's something, just such a great way to invest in yourself and then invest in those other women too.
Absolutely. They're awesome.
Now, Kristin, I think you and I could probably talk all day, but
maybe for a whole week. We'll do like a little retreat.
For a whole week. I know.
We'll do a week retreat somewhere at a spa somewhere fun.
Yes, let's do it. I was just talking to a woman earlier today about retreats that she holds. So we'll
sign us up.
book a retreat. We will book a retreat. But for the moms that are listening, what encouragement or advice would you give about building a culture, building a family culture rooted in faith?
I think, what advice would I give? I think the first thing is just start small. Yeah. I think there's a lot of pressure to be a certain type of mom and that you have to commit to a certain mold of a mom. And that's just not accurate or attainable. For some people it is, and that's great. But for me, I think that, I'm a lurker on Instagram, so I don't really post anything, but I like to look at things and I very quickly know the accounts that I follow, the mom accounts that fill me up and the ones that drain me. And the ones that fill me up are the ones that are being authentically themselves, and they're offering very real life advice. And so I plug into that. I see myself in that. It's very relatable. And then they're just offering encouragement, and I feel refreshed by that. And then there are other moms who I feel like are trying to tell you what to do, and it doesn't come off like encouragement. It doesn't come off like, hey, I'm here, I'm learning this, let me share it with you. Yes. It comes off very much like, this is how you do it. And some of that is based on what they're doing. So, there's a lot of accounts that are, how to create the perfect Halloween movie night for your kids and, things like that. And I'm attracted to that because, like, of course, yes, I want to create the perfect Halloween movie night for my kids. And like, maybe I do need these 20 products to do that. So I am definitely, I fall prey to that a lot. But at the core of it, I realize like, that drains me. Or like certain moms who are like, how to do the best morning routine so that you can have the best day. And it's like, how to do certain things. And I'm like, I don't think that like those things just kind of have this perfection level that feels unattainable. And then it makes me feel like I'm falling short. And we all feel like we're falling short already. So we don't need someone else to help with that. So I think that ultimately, like, that's one of the things I love about our faith so much is that you can come as you are. And so I want my kids to feel that way. I want them to know that they don't have to be a certain way in order to, come to our family, come to Jesus, whatever that may be. So I would say start small would be one. It's just like little things that you're probably already doing and that are probably already investing in them, get rid of the noise. So that's kind of like that Instagram accounts or the, people who are just kind of draining you in terms of making you feel like you don't live up to what a mom is or should be, or, don't use these products, they're toxic for your kids. And like, there's truth to some of that. I'm not knocking that, but sometimes I just feel like I can't use anything. Like I can't use anything to like wash my kids, to wash their things, for them to play with. Like, I feel like sometimes I'm like, I'm doing it all wrong. I don't know.
Yes. Oh my gosh. No, I'm with you. I remember when Andrew, my oldest, was a baby, I used to get these parenting magazines in the mail, and like taking a hot bath at the end of the day is like my favorite way to end up the day. And there was this time, like, I came upstairs from my bath with this magazine in my hand, and I was talking to my husband, and he was like, "Listen, I don't know why you read those magazines. They just stress you out every single time. You don't have to be a perfect mom. Like, we're not aiming for perfection here. Like, those are making you crazy." And I realized he was right. Like, it's exactly
Yes.
what you're talking about. It's like all of these things, like, oh, you should do this, you shouldn't do that. And I think we're just aiming to just we're aiming to hit the target, right? Like, we don't have to aim for the bullseye every single time, and getting rid of that noise can help us concentrate on that.
Yes. Yes. And I don't know. I was trying to think of the third one that I would say. I like to do things in threes.
I love that.
I think, I don't know. I feel like there's something about that, just this idea of, it kind of goes with starting small, but I just sometimes, maybe this is like the first two together, like the starting small, like you're probably already doing a lot of things just in your daily life and being a model, like we were talking about earlier. But I just feel like sometimes things become very showy very quickly about faith. And I think that it can be like, I think the intentions are good, but specifically in like Catholic family world, and there is no judgment in saying this, but I feel like a lot of it is like very appearance based of like,
Mhm.
look at how great we are. Look at how we're doing all the things. And one of the beautiful parts about the Catholic faith is all of the, feast days and the traditions that you can put in that. And it's all beautiful. And there's so many different ways to pray. And so, I always tell my students, like, the rosary is such a beautiful way to pray and to connect, with Mary and to connect with Jesus. And we have so many cool prayer tools and so many things at our fingertips. There's so many saints you can ask for intercession. There's just so much there. And it's beautiful and wonderful. But it has to be authentically like it has to be at a place where it's actually helping you connect to God, as
Yes.
opposed to feeling like you're doing what you should be doing in the
Right.
terms of like Catholic world. I think sometimes we get a little bogged down in, okay, well, I'm going to pray one rosary a day, and then I'm going to do Lectio Divina, and then I'm going to do some iconography, and then I'm going to, do a spiritual exercises, and then I'm going to do a nation contemplation. And it's like, there's so many, of these deep, beautiful, prayerful things, but like,
Right.
we don't have to do them all the time. So like,
Right. I'm just like imagining this big clipboard with a whole checklist of all
right.
of these. You're right. You're
It's
right,
just, there's
though.
just a lot. I mean, and I think it's all there. It's all there to be used. Like, it's all there, just to connect with our Savior. And if it's, I think maybe I'd say it's being real and truthful about where your family is, and not trying to force what you feel like you should be doing.
Yes.
Like, there's just a realness about faith that I think we sometimes forget about, that like, if it is your thing, for like, I'm excited to introduce my kids to the rosary. I think it's beautiful. I think it's wonderful. Do I think they have the attention span for that right now? I do not.
Probably not.
And so, do I think that would actually, something that's actually beautiful and prayerful, I actually think would be frustrating and aggravating if I
Right.
tried to implement that right now. But if I felt like I had to, if I felt like there was pressure on me to do that, there would be a lot of emotions mixed in with trying to
Yes.
do that.
Oh my
So
gosh. Yes.
I feel like you really, need to take a look at what you're trying to do. And like I said, it's kind of like starting small and getting rid of the noise combined, that like, do what feels right to you to connect to God. People connect to God in so many ways. You can, take a walk in nature. And for some people, that is the way that they feel the most connected. That is not my way. I love taking walks. I love noticing God's beauty, but like, that would not be my number one way.
Right.
Listening to worship music is not everybody's cup of tea. A lot of people, I just don't connect like that. But for me, if I'm in the middle of my kitchen making dinner and I am blasting some worship music and I am like singing and praising, I'm like, that is how I can take simple things like making dinner and turn it into this like holy moment for me.
I love that.
So I think that finding what that looks like for your family and not trying to force it, but what is the natural rhythm for your family? Is that, and maybe it is, like we use the Hallow app in our school, which is just a great prayer app, that has so many audio prayer meditations. And it's great because when you don't know what to pray, you can just be like, okay, great. It's going to like pray it for me. And I can just like, and so, for some people that might be what they do. And that would be amazing and great. And I think it's going to change as my kids grow. It's going to look differently. like it's going to look different depending on how we grow. But ultimately, I think just being true to yourself is really important when it comes to faith. And you can grow, and like, you may not like something you liked 10 years ago, and you may love something next week that you didn't really connect with, today. Not getting rid of that pressure, I think, is important.
Oh my gosh, that's so good. I feel like we do feel that pressure a lot. And now that you're talking, I'm like, oh, that gives me an idea, because the kids have learned to pray the rosary at church, but that we've not done it at home yet. And I'll admit that. And we're not trying to say we're perfect over here, but you gave me an idea using the Hallow app to help teach them how to pray that at home.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's
You're
perfect.
welcome.
I love that.
Thanks, Hallow.
Love that. Well, Kristin, oh my gosh, thank you for coming on here today. Thank you for sharing so authentically. I am just excited that this crew got to hear from you, and I'm excited. We're going to have to do it again. And then when you start your podcast, we're going to have to do it another time.
I would love that. I would love that. It's great to be here. I really appreciate just any platform where women are just trying to lift up other women. I think that so much content that you hear is kind of, like I said, either having this like perfection type level that nobody can meet and having everything appear perfect, and you're making people feel like they don't measure up. And so I think all of us just need more encouragement. Like, you're doing a great job, and you can, are so where God has you to be. And all you have to do is show up and like give your heart, and like God will do the rest. And that's what I tell myself often. And especially in moments when I lose my temper and I feel frustrated and I'm just like, why am I like this? But then you just say, you know what? God's bigger. God's grace is bigger. And what he has set before me, I can do, and I can approach with his help, with his grace, with his mercy. And that just kind of is the everyday life of whatever you have going on, whether it's a really busy season, whether it's a slow season, whether it's a season of waiting, whether it's a season of anticipation, whether it's a season of disappointment. There's so much as women that we go through in terms of seasons. And I just feel like if we were able to just kind of accept where we are and then say, how can I lift up other women in this season, the better off we'll be and the more connected we'll be to Jesus.
I love that. Well, Kristin, thank you so much. And I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. And we will catch you on the next episode. Until then, stay anchored with purpose.